It's fantastic to see your smiling face once again. I want to discuss with you today a few questions that people are starting to ask me about SOMA, which is incredibly exciting because all of a sudden we're starting to get some interest about what we do with clients, what to expect from the immersion, and what's this really going to give us for our return on investment. Let's talk about one component of the immersion that we're going to go through, and that's movement. Would you like to enlighten us on possibly what the return on investment these people will get for their time and money from our 3-day immersion?
Yeah, and that's great. And it's great to see. In essence, the immersion is going to have 3 main components, as you and I both know, and we strategically have put together. And the first one is movement. The second one is the osteofascial release, and we'll talk about that in another recording, and then the fascial mobilizers, which we'll talk about in the third one. So let's knock down each of those, because I think people think, oh, I already know about that. I've already heard that. I already see that. And we want to kind of eliminate that and talk about what we're going to do. So when we go into movement, what we're going to be doing in the immersion for movement component, which is going to be all of day one, we're going to spend all of one day going through movement, and there's precursor information or links that we're going to send people prior to showing up, so they can get some information from the Gray Institute, they can get some information from Gil Headley, they can get some information from Thomas Myers that talks about some of the stuff that we're going to then demonstrate. So it's very collaborative, it's very eclectic. But what we want to get across in movement is both biomechanics and what I call, we're calling emotocanics. So it's how the body moves. We want people to understand what the Gray Institute, I think, has done as best as anyone in the world, is what real and relative motion is. Now, we're not going to dive into the full depths of it, because that's where you're going to go to them. But we're going to understand how joints operate and how muscles operate, because that's extremely important, that a lot of us don't grasp and we don't understand, and that's going to create an awareness so we can get a visualization of what's happening mechanically when the person moves. Now, what we're going to do is we want to then apply that and take that a step farther. We want to look at how the brain and the body interact, how the communication system within the body is manifesting itself through movement. And this is where the brain and the fascial matrix, which in essence is an extension of the brain. And we'll talk about the brain or brains in more detail in the immersion itself, but how the brain and the fascia connect, no pun, actually deep pun intended, to demonstrate and show us what movement is. And this is where we get into things that we've alluded to, the breath rate, the breathing, the facial expressions, the body language, what postures they're in, what they look like, sound like, what words they're using, how they're expressing themselves in totality, and how that plays into understanding movement. So yes, the joints move in semi-predictable manner, and the muscles work in a semi-predictable manner, and we can under that, but we need to understand how that works. But then we really need to get into, how does the emotional capacity of the person, how does the stress response of that person, how does the ability of that person to manage their stress or deal with it show up in their movement, in their postures? And then how do we combat that with our strategies? And then that's the key. How do we see it? What do we see? What are we hearing, feeling, and seeing? And then that leads us into the engage, and that's where the listen can part of our lead system. This is why the lead system is so important. How do I listen to this person? Eyes, ears, and then the intuition of what's going on in the body. But if you don't have an understanding, a fundamental foundation of what's biomechanically happening, and then an understanding of what's the mindset capacity, blending the two together, then we don't really truly get at movement, we get at biomechanics. This isn't a biomechanical course. This is a movement-based course, and how to listen to it.
And Roddy, I think that is so important to understand, is that it's not about what we think we know. It's about the humility of actually asking, of bringing all the information we have that we've learned over the years, And if we can put that and present that in front of us and have it in the background of looking at the human being in front of us, the results will be instantly brilliant. And the change we see in our clients will be phenomenal. So, I think once again, Roddy, what you've laid out on the table there is something that is so fundamental, but yet we don't get. So it's that movement component, massive. And now what we're going to do is we're going to move into the next section and look at how we can start to change that movement component with some of the tools. We'll be right back.